Hey guys, it is Kendra, and we are entering our third week of the Beautifully Broken series. And today I'm going to discuss Ruth. And this is one of my favorite books of the Bible because it is just an awesome story and testament to how good and faithful God is to us and can be to us, even if we appear to be in a broken place or season. So we find in the book of Ruth, we find Naomi, and she's in the land of Moab with her two daughters-in-law, and her husband and her sons have died. So all three of the women are widows, and Naomi is like over it, and she's ready to go back to her homeland. And so she tells the two girls to go back to the homes of their mothers, and hopefully the Lord will bless them with husbands in their land. Because she can't, she's like, I don't have a husband and I can't produce any more sons for you. Her one daughter-in-law, Orpah, decides that she's going to stay, but Ruth is like, no, I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying with you, and I'm going where you want to go. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. And so Naomi realizes very quickly that she will not be able to get rid of Ruth because Ruth is literally ride or die, because she said, I'm not leaving you unless death departs us. So the two women go back to Naomi's land, and Naomi, the people of the land, they recognize Naomi, and they like, hey, Naomi. And she's like, don't call me that. Don't call me Naomi. Call me Mara, which means to be bitter. Because she was like, my name, Naomi, means pleasant, and nothing pleasant going on with me now. Like, I left this land full, and I'm coming back empty-handed. My husband and my sons are gone. Like, don't call me Naomi. It's nothing pleasant about me. I'm very bitter right now. So that's how she was. So she didn't realize that she was blessed, that her daughter-in-law had come back with her. And so her daughter-in-law says, hey, all right, we're here now. It's the beginning of the barley harvest. So I'm going to go find a field and try to, join in the harvest and get what we can, get what I can get for us. So she goes out and she finds the land in a field, and she asks, can she glean there? And, they give her permission. And while she's gleaning there, a man named Boaz notices her, and he happens to be the owner of the field, and he asks about her. And the men who are over his field say, oh, that's the daughter-in-law of Naomi who has come back with her, and her husband is gone. So he's like, okay. So he goes and he tells her, listen, anything that you need, you got it. Like, you can stay here, glean in these fields. They're safe. You'll be fine here. And he puts out a word like, look, guys, nobody better not harm her. And he tells her, look, you can glean with my female maidservants. And, if you get thirsty, there's provision for that. There's a drink for that, and whatever you need, we got it. And so he also invites her to eat with him at his table and allows her to take the leftovers. And he gives word to the men of his field to, to leave, extra behind for her so that she can take it back, because he knows that she is taking care of her mother-in-law. And so eventually, it comes to a point where Naomi says, listen, it's time for me to find you a home. And so she says, the man you've been working for, Boaz, he's our kinsman, and you can marry him. He's a part of the family. And so she tells Ruth what to do, and Ruth goes and she's obedient. She follows the instruction that Naomi gives her. And so when Ruth realizes that Ruth is laying at his feet, he says, you are a woman of noble character, and everyone knows that, and I know someone who is closer related to you guys than I am, so we'll go tomorrow and we'll get everything straightened out so that you can be redeemed the proper way. Boaz goes and he goes to the relative. He says, do you want to, Naomi's trying to sell the land of her husband. Do you want to redeem it? You're next in line. And the family member's like, sure, I will. And he's like, all right, well, if you do redeem it, you will also acquire her daughter-in-law Ruth. And so the relative then realizes that, he's not going to be able to do it. And he says, okay, Boaz, you can have the land and you take on the woman. I can't do it. And so they do this exchange, and Boaz goes and he marries her and redeems her. And then they get married, they have a child, and that's pretty much the book of Ruth in a nutshell. So we're going to go over a few things that I discovered while reading this. And so the first thing is we have to be willing to leave the familiar and go to the unfamiliar. So in the land of Moab at this point, there is a famine going on. And both Naomi, Ruth, and Orpah, all their husbands are gone. They're dead. And so we see you have a choice. Stay in the land of the dead men of your past, or go on to the land where they have gotten word that God is there and he's blessing them with food. So, Orpah, now this is crazy to me, right? Because why would you stay in a land that is famine stricken, like it's nothing there? Why would you stay there and you heard like that the land that your mother-in-law is trying to go back to has been blessed and that they have food there? Like, that alone would be enough to make you be like, all right, well, let me just go here and see what's going on here. But Orpah, she cannot let go of the dead men of the past. She can't let go of that land that she is used to, despite the fact that it is lacking and there's nothing left there but the past, the old things, the dead things that, she's grown accustomed to. That's the only thing that's there, but she can't leave it. Ruth, on the other hand, she's like, listen, I got to get out of here. Like, there's nothing left here. My past is my past. My husband is dead. I can't bring him back. So let me move on and go to a land where they are at least flourishing and have food, and their God is providing for them. And so it's just amazing to see that we are often Orpah instead of Ruth in these situations where we are in a place that is full of dead men from our past or dead things from our past, and it's just desolate and nothing is there. And although nothing is left there for us, we are not benefiting from this land anymore or from this place in our life. We can't let go for whatever reason. And it's so crazy that we can become so in love or so loyal to something that is dead and not feeding us and not giving life to us. And we become so in love with that thing that we are willing to stay in the famine and go with less than just to stay with something that is not even serving us at all in a beneficial way. So we see Ruth, and she goes, and the beautiful thing about her is that when she decides to leave everything that she knows, all the things of her past, she says, I'm going to give up the familiar and go to the unfamiliar. When she does that and she declares that she's going to let Naomi's God be her God, God just opens up doors for her. And it's so amazing because as soon as they return to Bethlehem, they are in the beginning of the barley harvest. And so God will allow us to walk into a harvest that we didn't sow into when we are obedient to him. And so she didn't sow. She wasn't there when they were sowing into that land and, waiting to reap the harvest. But God allowed her to walk into a harvest that she had not sowed. Now, one way we can look at it is that although she didn't sow physically, her sacrifice to leave everything that she knew was God. God took her sacrifice to let go of everything that she knew and follow him as her sowing into her next into her destiny and her next point in life. And so, like I said, we see her now in the field of Boaz, and Boaz takes notice of her. So when we begin to walk in the purpose and will of God for our lives, he will begin to allow men to take notice of us without any effort or anything like that. When we're focused and our minds are on the things of God and the things that God has called us to do, whether it is serve an elderly family member or whatever it is. Like sometimes God will give us a gift and a purpose, and we don't want to do it because it's not on a large scale. Like many of us have gifts and talents, but we only want to use them if we can get glory and not give God glory. But sometimes God is calling us to smaller things so that He can later enlarge our territory, but He's waiting to see how we will handle the small things, how we will be faithful over the small things. And if you go to Matthew 15, 26, I want to say, or 21, sorry, Matthew 15:21. If you go there and we see the where God says, my good and faithful servant, you have been faithful over few, I will make you ruler over many. That's exactly where we see Ruth, because she goes to this land and she's going and she's reaping the harvest so that she can provide for her and her mother-in-law, and God allows Boaz to take notice of her. And then eventually, he begins to protect and provide for her. So when we are in the will of God, not only will God bless us and allow us to walk into a harvest that we didn't sow into, He will also begin to give us favor, protection, provision. Because we see Boaz and he goes and he puts out the word, nobody better touch this girl. She better be safe in these fields. He says, you can have whatever you need. And he makes the men of his field leave a little extra for her. So now we see he's protecting her. He's making provision for her. She has found favor for being faithful to God. So being in the will of God, there's so many benefits, to being in His will and doing what He called us to do, and not being worried about getting noticed. Because when we are not worried about getting noticed, God will then make our name great. We shouldn't be trying to make our name great, because then we're working and operating out of the flesh instead of being in the will of God and being in His purpose and allowing Him to push us to the forefront where He wants us to be, and allowing who He wants to see us. Because sometimes when we do things to attract attention to ourselves, we will attract the wrong attention, and you don't want to attract the wrong attention. So Ruth is being very faithful, and God has allowed her to just walk into blessings, as we can see. So then Naomi says, okay, I think we can get you a husband. Like, Boaz, he is our next of kin. And so she gives Ruth instruction. So it's also very important that as a younger generation, that we allow the elders and the people in our lives who are experienced in areas that we aren't, to pour into our lives and to be obedient and just take wisdom from them, because they know things that we don't know, and they can help push us into our destiny when we are obedient to the instruction they give us. So she receives the instruction from Naomi. She goes and she does what Naomi tells her to do, which is to get washed and dressed in her best perfume and go lay at the feet of Boaz. And when she does that, Boaz realizes that she is there, and he is such a man of God and such an example for the men of God today, that you should protect a woman's purity. So when he finds her at his feet and she says, you are my kinsman's redeemer, and I'm here, to be redeemed by you. And he is honest. He's a man of integrity. And he says, I am your kinsman's redeemer, but there is a relative who is closer to you than I. So in the morning we will go and settle this matter, and if he won't marry you, I will. And so it's so beautiful to see a man of God who is willing to protect a woman's purity and not use her for his own pleasure, and say, all right, because he could have easily had slept with her and then tried to turn her over to the relative that was next in line to receive her. And so many men will use you, and they'll take you, and they'll see that there's beauty in you and there's purity in you, and they're attracted to that, and instead of protecting that, they will go and try to take it and use it and pervert it. So you have to be very careful, men, to make sure you are being who God called you to be, and that's to protect a woman's purity, not abuse it. So the next day he goes to the relative, and he tells the relative, look, do you want to redeem this land? And if you do, you have to acquire this roof. And another great example of a man of God is that a man of God will never take on or be disloyal to his already existing family. So the relative who was next in line to receive the land and Ruth, he says, I can't do it because I don't want to endanger my estate. So he had already had his estate or his household established, and he was not willing to take on Ruth because he knew that he was not the one for her. He knew that he could not take on another wife, and he said, because he was willing to take on the land, but he was like, you know what, I'm not gonna take her on because I know this is not who is supposed to come into my household. So a real man of God is going to always have integrity and always walk in what's right and make the best decision for you. So if you're with a man and he, you're dating him, if he realizes that you guys are not on one accord, so he should always be praying and seeking God about, whether you guys should be together or not. And if he realizes that you're not the one from him, he won't mess over you. He will let you go so that you can be with the man that is called and who you belong to. And so he says, I can't take her. You can marry her. It's fine. And so we see him handing her over to a man who is willing to receive her. And the beautiful thing is, Boaz could have easily tried to be sneaky and marry her and not go before the relative who she belonged to technically next. And he didn't do that. So a real man of God is going to recognize that you belong to God. And he's going to go to God. He's going to go to the person who he knows has rights over you, which in this case is God. So anytime a man of God wants you, he should always be seeking out God to make sure that that's what God has called for you guys to be together, and get permission from God to marry you. And so, the relative gives her over to Boaz, and they get married, and she bears a son named Obed. Now, this is the beautiful thing about this whole story, and it just blesses me, and I hope it encourages you as well. A woman who had appeared to have lost everything. She had lost her husband. She had left everything she knew. Like, we could easily consider her broken, because to lose a spouse or a loved one and to leave everything or lose everything that you knew and give up everything that you know, and then for God to turn your situation around because you trusted in him enough to just walk into what he called you to do. And he allowed a woman who appeared to have nothing and be nothing and lost her husband and didn't even belong to anybody. He allowed her to come into be a part of the lineage of Christ, because Obed is the father of Jesse, who is the father of King David, and we know that King David is of the lineage of Jesus Christ. So a woman who allowed God to operate in her life and direct her to where she was supposed to be, and allowed God to be the Lord over her life. He allowed her to go from a woman who had nothing technically to a woman who is now a part of one of the greatest lineage of all time. Like, we get our savior out of this woman's, comes from this, through this woman. So, like, just imagine what God can do when we turn from those dead, ugly, desolate things that are no longer serving us and are no longer beneficial to us, and allow God to begin to operate and move in our lives. And when we move quietly and do the things that God has called us to do on a lower level, God will raise us up to be a part of something much more greater than we ever expected. Like, do you think she expected to be the great grandmother of King David, one of the greatest king in the Bible? So it's just awesome to see that God can use us even after we seem to be thrown away and discarded, and we've decided to leave the dead things, and God says, okay, you're ready for what I can do now. Once we decide to leave those dead things, God will allow us to just walk into such greatness, and He will just prosper our lives in such a way that we never imagined. So guys, I just pray that you stay encouraged and that God will bless you through this message, and I will talk to you guys next week.